Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of the LifeHugger podcast. I am Evelyn, and today we have my friend and my colleague, Joe. In this episode, we are going to be talking about fame. Joe knows a little bit about this because he used to be a celebrity in Vietnam.
So my life story goes like this. I graduated university in Canada, and I studied theater. I was always very curious about fame. I just wanted to know, what does it feel like to have somebody who doesn't know you recognize you? Like I was just intensely curious about that feeling. So I came to Vietnam not long after graduation. I was working for UNICEF. It was an interesting time to be in Vietnam. It was before Starbucks, KFC. It was still tree-lined streets. I was very curious about the language, about the culture. I wanted to learn more. So I started studying at university. My Vietnamese got better and better, and I started writing a blog in 2006.
In Vietnamese?
In Vietnamese. That was when the internet first came to Vietnam, right? And it was dial-up, and it was just Yahoo. The whole internet was Yahoo. And Yahoo had their messenger, and then they had this blogging platform called 360. I was trying to write like funny stories about things I saw or things that were just appeared to me very strange, but were very normal in local context. And one day I woke up and there was like 100,000 visitors to you, and I thought, no, something's wrong. I have like 5 people reading my blog. So I went to my latest article and there was like 3,000 comments or something like that. Then the TV station got in touch and they said, hey, we think your blog is funny. Would you like to host a TV show? And of course I said yes, right? I was like, hey, I'm in. I didn't do anything. I'm in. So I hosted a TV show for a couple of years, and all of those questions I had about what's it like when people recognize you on the street, what's it like when you get interviewed, what's it like when you sign books, all that sort of stuff. All those questions I got answers to. I feel like I kind of concluded my research some point after that. I was like, okay, I'm done. I get it. After I answered all those questions, I started to think in a more kind of like, what is fame all about anyway? And I started learning a lot about evolutionary biology.
Before we get to this evolutionary biology thing, just a quick fast forward. So when I first encountered Joe, it was when you first came to the office. And then I don't even think I saw you yet, but a few of my friends who are Vietnamese, they were like, oh my gosh, this celebrity is at the office and we need to go take a picture with him.
Yeah.
And then they turned out to be your teammates, or you joined that team afterwards. So then I was like, damn, like, wow, these people know him, like he must be famous.
Yeah, it's interesting for client meetings too. It's like sometimes the client's like half looking at you like, I've seen this person before, but they're talking about Google. And
so what is the whole evolutionary biology
so I came to the
thing?
conclusion that fame is just the weirdest thing. It's very unnatural because for most of human history, I don't know exactly how long human history goes back, but it's something like 200,000 years or whatever, until say 4,000 years ago when you started to have humans congregate in cities. For the 90x% of human history, we've lived in these small bands of 100 to 150 people. And that is absolutely natural. And that is how diet developed, that's how social interactions develop, that's how everything in your brain that responds to social stimuli around you pretty much developed for that time. So outside of your band, there was no such idea like you could be world famous.
I think that this desire to be famous, it's kind of like now it's on a bigger scale, right? Because we do have access, like internet, whatever. So when you think of fame, you're like, oh, people around the world are going to know me. Back then, people maybe had the desire to be like known too, but then it would just be like within that community of 100 or even like 500 people that they knew.
And your point is exactly right, that you would want that just within your group.
Yeah.
But that is, for the most part, achievable, even if your talent is low. Right? If you really want to be famous within a group of 100 to 150 people, you just will be. If you look at the math now, it's different. Right? So if you want to be famous, like you have to hit a certain level of fame. You can be famous within a nightclub scene, a city, a country. Then there's this idea of being like some sort of a global
megastar.
Mathematically, the odds are almost like zero. The amount of people that are going to fail, conversely, is very high, right? So I'm pretty sure there's some ratio. Somewhere in the mix, there is like this group of people that just has an intense desire for fame. But the difference is that for most of human history, you could fulfill that. That is a completely reasonable expectation. Now, in this context, everyone except, a very small number feel like they've somehow failed. So it's the same percentage of the human population.
Right.
Relatively speaking, it's the same chunk. But that chunk nowadays is going to be much more disappointed or feeling unfulfilled than that same chunk, relatively speaking.
Because it's
before.
much harder now.
How on earth are you
Right.
going to become known to the group? Because the group is so huge now.
Yeah,
Right?
we have more channels of becoming famous now, right? Because before, even like 10, 20 years ago, to be really famous, you got to make it on TV. But then now you could do this, like you could just do a YouTube video. Because now there are so many online channels where you could be famous. There's YouTube, Instagram, like that Chinese TikTok, that then encourages people who otherwise would not have had the idea of becoming famous, want to be famous. If you ask kids these days or like teenagers, like, what do you want to be? One of the top answers is, oh, I want to be a YouTuber.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just so within reach. Like, those are the idols that they look up to. For us, it was MTV. But then how do you make it on MTV, right? Like, it's so much harder. You actually have to be truly famous to be
famous.
To be famous. But then now you can kind of just be, like, semi-famous. Even, like, if you're on Instagram and you have, like, 20,000 followers, you've made it on Instagram, you know?
Yeah. Maybe the pull of evolutionary biology is making us try to find this balance that we used to have. Now it's kind of coming back and allowing people to become kind of micro celebrities, which is probably the most natural form of celebrity anyway, because back in the day everyone was a micro celebrity, except in their thinking they were the most famous person in the world because their world was 150 people. So it almost feels like evolutionary biology is like, okay, you know, I kind of lost control for a while, but now I've got a way to get back to how things were.
Right.
Because of technology, right? So in a way, it's like, we're just going back to our evolutionary default.
I never thought about fame or technology or whatever in that sense. Like, I kind of just feel like we're kind of moving forward. But then you're saying that there's this like predetermined how society should be, or like how communities are supposed to be interacting with each other, and then we can't really escape from that.
I think there's two ways to look at it. So one way is this desire to be famous, like whatever the reason, the manifestation likely has some sort of survival benefit, or it is a side effect of something else that has such a strong survival benefit that we can accept the side effects. So it's either or, right? So
yeah. Wait, so let's get into that actually. Like, what do you think are the evolutionary or like the social benefits of being famous?
Yeah, it'd be pretty. I mean, I'm sure there's some research. I've read some research on this coming at it from common sense angle. It seems like you could make an argument that somebody who's famous wants, first of all, what do they want? They want attention from everybody, and they want to provoke some sort of reaction in everybody. Like, that's essentially the core of it. And oftentimes that's attention for their song, and then the positive reaction is people feel better. If you just want to come at it from the point of morale or, you know, keeping things buzzing, then you could come up with a pretty logical argument that this has some sort of survival benefit.
We know that humans are social animals, right? And being famous, I think, is tied to the desire of like being wanted or like being accepted into all of these different groups. That's from the person who wants to be famous. I think from the rest of the community, going to concerts, right? It's like you band up with like a group of people who all like this celebrity, and then it's like a very communal thing.
Yeah, and you have something to talk about because critical for the formation of language is something to talk about. And there's a lot of arguments that talking about each other is really what spurred the growth of language in the human species. Like, and if you look at monkeys in the wild, like the whole time it's just they're playing games with each other, or they're fighting with each other, or they're just so obsessed with each other, right? And humans, obviously, you know, the same. Like there's a certain obsession about each other, but for that obsession to form into language, you need to have some people be a subject for verbal articulation of whatever that happens to be. So I think that there's could be an element like that. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different competing theories in there, but one thing seems pretty sure is that the ratio seems to be pretty consistent, right? So for every X number of people, like every company has somebody who wants to be the MC, every school has somebody who wants to be in the school play. Even they've looked at things like comedians, you know, who wants to be a comedian, and that seems to be certain percentage of the population. So it seems like all of these slices of the pizza are somehow hardwired in. But then it's just that, like, The disappointment is what changes once you
Right.
once you introduce the impossibility of becoming famous for everyone, because the concept
Yeah.
of everyone changes to the detriment of those who want to be famous. The concept of everyone is now not everyone you know. The concept of everyone is just everyone.
Of course, there are people who aim to be world famous, but I think a lot of people would be pretty happy with just 10,000 followers. And I think like they would feel like a celebrity in their own community. I don't think that it necessarily, like, because we can reach more people, I don't think that that necessarily increases our expectation of how many people we want to reach.
And I wonder if most people who are mega famous now would be more or equally satisfied if they were just famous in a small circle.
I think like
happier, right?
how happy you are, how content you are with like your success, it's always measured against your expectation.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, back to you. After your blog started picking up and you're like, oh, like I'm actually like I have a good shot at being famous. What was the scope of the people that you wanted to be famous
Yeah, so
in?
it never ends, right? It's like, okay, now I'm somewhat famous in Vietnam, but I haven't done this and I haven't done that, and
Okay.
it's like it never ends. And then you start to think, well, what about people back in Canada? I can try to segue off of this small success I've had in Vietnam and then come back to Canada and write a book about my time.
Did you ever pursue Canada?
No. I kind of was like, okay, if it's going to never end, then may as well. That's another thing. Once you do something, you can only do more of that thing. Once you become famous, you can only become more famous. You can either let it go and try other things, or you can just become more famous.
I think you go into it with the desire to be famous. So then that was kind of the goal, would you say?
Yeah.
Right? So I think when your goal is to be famous, then of course to be more successful, you just have to be more and more famous because that's like the metric that you are going by. But then I think some people who are famous, actually, I don't know. I'm sure they also want to be famous, but then in line with that, they also are like really determined to make music. Let's say, would it be that for them it's just like, oh, like making more music, making albums that speak the words of, their emotions or whatever, and then being famous, of course, that's like another
Okay,
desire, like in parallel, but that might not be the goal.
Yeah, I kind of wonder when you hear people who are interviewed and they say, it's all about the work and just as if fame came along for the ride.
Yeah. Me too.
Right? Because first of all, to become that good at whatever it is you're doing and that dedicated to your craft, you need a lot of motivation. And
part of the motivation is for more people to experience your work.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some people that are just really into what it is that they're doing, and then fame kind of happens and they're indifferent towards it.
Right.
But that, just by virtue of the dynamic there, that's got to be a rare case because they wouldn't be seeking it. Something would have to happen. Something lucky, someone would have to introduce them or something like that. Like, they're not going to be putting themselves out there. I don't know. I would be a little bit skeptical of that, although I'm sure that in some rare cases, I'm sure there's some people that are just dedicated to doing what they do and they just become famous. Did you ever want to be famous?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, now look at you. What have we got? 8 subscribers now?
8 subscribers. I'm famous.
120 or something, and you're like prehistoric levels already.
Exactly.
So why? What did you do about it or not do about it?
I don't know. So I used to do a lot of theater in high school.
And did you feel like after your performances, did you feel somehow as if you had...
like if I was famous?
If you had worked according to design. Like, I'm an airplane and I flew, so I worked as I was designed. This kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you get that feeling like I'm according to design. It's a certain type of pleasure.
I've actually never thought about it that way. But do you mean that like you just feel like you're doing what you're meant to do kind of thing?
Yeah, or what evolutionary biology has demanded that you
I didn't think that deep. I didn't think that far into it. As like maybe this was like what, genetically I was designed to do. But then I did feel Like, it was one of those things while I was doing it, I didn't think about anything else. It's not like, I don't know, doing work sometimes where your mind, goes off and you're thinking about like what to eat for lunch or whatever. But like when I was performing, when I was on stage, it was just like I was there.
Yeah.
So then I did definitely feel like I was doing what I'm passionate about and like what I'm supposed to be doing. But I kind of just thought of it as like those are like my interests. But then, okay, so back to being famous. I think I definitely did, maybe even do, like have the desire to be famous. But I don't think that ever came as like the only thing. When I did theater, I saw, I guess, the process, like being on stage and like doing theater as attractive or even more attractive than being famous. And like being famous was kind of like the side effect of that. It's like I would be so good at like my craft that I would then become famous.
But would you ever do it with nobody in the seats?
No. But that's the thing with theater, and I think with a lot of arts, is that you do it because you want other people to experience it. And a big part of theater is storytelling. And I think that's kind of the reason why I'm starting my podcast too, is I think it's like storytelling, generating conversations. But of course, like I love talking to you, and we would be having this conversation maybe over lunch too. But I think it's different when it's
No,
I
don't think we would be having this conversation.
Hey, we've actually had some pretty good conversations in the past, though.
This is true. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think
you need a forum.
Yeah, I do think it's different when it's like the idea of like you are talking or performing or something, and then somebody else is, I don't know, it's like you're making them think a little bit differently, or they're enjoying it.
And the other thing, too, is the correlation between fame and talent, right? That correlation didn't used to be so important. You didn't have to be great as a singer to become famous. I mean, okay, you could argue that now.
I was going to say, you think you need to be a great singer? No?
But you can't really be out of tune. Did you?
I would actually argue against that because, like, you being famous, you definitely had the talent of learning the language, right? But then it helps because you're white, like,
Yeah, this is true. Like, if you had a Vietnamese person come to Canada
and speak English.
I had this stand-up comedy bit where I talked about ordering a muffin from Starbucks. Like, I could go into Vietnam and do a coffee shop, and I can order a coffee and a muffin in Vietnamese. And I was like, whoa.
Exactly.
Great, right?
Exactly.
But Vietnamese person's like, well, I'll have a chocolate chip muffin or whatever.
Like, Vietnamese person goes to America, tries to speak English, and it's somewhat broken. Then people are just like, fob. You know?
Like, no one's going to be like, whoa.
No one's going to appreciate that.
I think it's really useful for anybody who wants to be famous or had some desire to, have that attention or adulation. I think it's important to actually understand where that comes from, because then first of all, you can accept, okay, that totally makes sense, why I have it. And I'm sure there's interesting research that I haven't even come across as to why a group of 100 people would want to stand up and jump around and stuff like that. And I think it's I think something that should be studied a lot more and should be seen in that context. I think it's helpful. Then you can say, okay, all right, I get it. Makes sense why this seems to be wired into me. And if I don't achieve it, then that's kind of an artifact of this bizarre situation that we find ourselves in compared to most of human history.
Right.
And then it's a little bit easier to be, okay, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Or you could just set your expectation kind of low. You can be like, if I hit 100 subscribers, that's it, dude.
Yeah, but it gives
I'm done.
It gives legitimacy to like the it's okay, because sometimes you think, well, it's okay, I'll be in my local theater group and it's okay, but really it's not okay. If you actually understand this whole history to it and the neurological evolutionary aspect to it, then it actually really it is okay. Like it's legitimately okay. It gives some legitimacy to that it's okay. So I think that's it's just impossible for the number of people that want to be famous. And famous, the definition of famous being known to everybody in a city or a country or anything. It's just impossible for that same group of people to achieve it. But that's a new thing. So as long as you get your head around that, I think it's useful. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so
it's
like...
okay, Evelyn.
As
long as you get 100 subscribers on this podcast.
What I'm hearing is that you're saying, like, it's okay if you don't make it because it's natural to have those desires to, like, want more and more people to know about you. and that it's okay to not achieve it because it's like a numbers game and it's like kind of impossible.
Yeah, and I think so what's it, right? It's okay to not make it. Well, if you just take it as the definition of most of human history, and that means 100, let's say 150 people. So if it is being known to 150 people, like, you can do that. Like,
no, but you know what?
You can achieve the same level of fame as every famous person from the dawn of humankind until the pyramids.
But I think
right?
being known to a group of people is different from achieving celebrityhood, because I think being known, that's like kind of knowing your neighbors or like knowing your friends, but I think the idea of being famous is having people look up to you. It's like you have fans, and I think having fans is different from having friends. Right? So the key takeaway is that it is natural for people to want to be famous, and it's also pretty normal to not make it, and it's okay.
And the other takeaway is that technology seems to be allowing evolutionary biology to take back lost ground. In the same way, evolutionary biology seems to be doing this with other things too. And I think that's actually the more interesting part. If you think about it, this all of these concepts, they're coming from just a loss of privacy, increased targeting, filter bubbles, fracturing of societies, polarization, all this sort of stuff. Like, it all seems to be just a return to a default state, not a crumbling or anything like that. It just seems to be like a resetting.
Right.
And who knows? I mean, maybe we'll get to a certain state that's relatively stable, that we can go on quite a while. Like, we'll all lose a lot of privacy. Everything will be very messy for a while as society tries to figure itself out. The time of like the global superstar could be over. It could be.
Or we're like in the decline and it'll be over in the near future. All right then, so with that,
everyone has to catch the
podcast. I need to catch my shuttle. All right, thanks for listening. See you later.
That was a long time.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Evelyn.